One to come.
Remember the total new dealers?
22.
But no,
Oh, no.
actual, okay.
And you got, I was going to say, you've got quite an impressive list of dealers coming to this show. I mean, good God, Steve Taylor's flying all the way over from the UK
Right.
to come to this show.
Yeah, he's taking Larry Martin's place.
And Labor and Fred Boatwright. Kurt, I suspect, probably comes to that show every year.
Yeah.
Okay, well, since the show was brought up, one of the things I had for announcements was an expo update, and Ralph does not seem to be with us. Stanley, are you in a position to give us an update, or anyone else?
Not really. I'm not sure about the date
What date?
for the expo meeting.
It's Thursday.
The 27th,
Okay, Judy knows.
Yeah, we're supposed to have a expo meeting Thursday evening.
Thursday, that's right.
Thursday of this week?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
But
What
as far
time?
as I know, everything's on track. And going good. So, and we got 22 dealers, and we'll miss Larry, but he is being replaced by Thomas, so that's good.
that's your mail out.
And I went ahead and
You got the mail out?
Yep,
everybody should have received theirs by now. And
okay.
the club is making 50 masks for everybody. So like stamp mask, not a surgical mask, or unless you want one. Found some nice looking stamp material and had my neighbor fix up 50 masks. So those will be available Thursday.
Oh, yeah. One thing on the door prizes, I picked out some stamps from that 4 albums that Tom Cunningham gave me, and we're going to give those away as door prizes in addition to the $25 certificates.
Very good. Sounds like it would be quite enticing to come, both as a worker and as a participant. All right, thank you. Debbie Hathaway has agreed to keep notes of this meeting. I know that makes
Skip happy.
our buddy from Stephenville happy. And thank you very much, Debbie. I do appreciate that.
Dad,
Also, we have a election of officers. I think the ballots have to be in November 4th, our meeting for November 4th. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if you haven't voted, the ballot was in last month's newsletter. And I encourage you to support the officers and show them that you want them, and vote for them. There was a slate of officers with all officers filled. So appreciate those of you who serve as officers. And moving on, Gary McNamee does a session called Where in the World Is It? So I'm going to turn it over to Gary.
Okay, thanks, Dave. This country issued its first stamp in 1918. Some of the early stamps show Viking ships, and some have the term Vabarik, V-A-B-A-R-I-I-K.
Iceland?
No. In local language, that means republic. There are some stamps that have a design on them that look like a slinky, if you're familiar with the old toy slinky. There are also some stamps, many stamps, that have a coat of arms for the country with 3 lions stacked on top of one another. The currency unit for the country is called a krooni, K-R-O-O-N-I. There were no stamps issued by the country from 1940 till 1991. So there were 51 years where no stamps were issued. I thought maybe that one would get me an answer, but I don't see one yet. One of the recent set of stamps is entitled "The Birds of the Baltic Shores." And I kind of wonder whether that one ought to get me an answer.
Faroe Islands.
No,
Well, if it's Baltic, then it's got to be either Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. I'll say Estonia.
you are correct, Scott English.
Right.
The
Okay,
long pause and stamps definitely started narrowing it down for me.
Definitely.
okay, Scott, you win the prize.
That was a good one, Gary.
Pardon?
That was a good one.
Oh, thanks.
All right.
It's the
Now,
Viking ship that threw me off.
Rob Hathaway, anything from the International Society of Worldwide Collectors?
Sure, I'll give you a couple of minutes. You know, literally there are so many members in mid cities that you could, ask anybody. I will point out by saying our most recent article by our own Ken Wills on philatelic covers. He calls them some other things, but he talks about some of the covers he's having fun with. The ISWSC is doing quite well. They have many programs, and they're all described in their newsletters and on their websites, and most of us take advantage of them. Several of us here are taking advantage of their mail bid sales. Mail bid sales are a spectacular thing. Society sales in general are a spectacular thing when we don't have shows to go to. As several people, I think Gary, several people have been taking advantage of that. The membership report looks like they picked up 18 members and only dropped 6 for a non-payment. So I think they're doing well in these times. And Debbie's the editor, co-editor. She's the copy proof. What is proof?
I'm a copy editor. In other words, I take submissions and whip them into shape grammatically and structurally so they can be read by people.
And
Rob,
Thank you for that.
How's
It's
payment?
quite challenging sometimes.
How is payment handled?
payment for what?
Well, if you bid on an auction, how do you pay?
You can send them a check, or you can pay on PayPal, or
Okay.
give them your credit card. They'll take anything. And I haven't participated since I lost my job, to tell you the truth. But I generally bid minimum bids, and it varies widely. I might get 1 out of 5 bids I put in. I might get 4 out of 5 bids I put in. There have been a couple of things I really wanted, revenues I specifically needed, nice Canadian revenues, where I double the minimum bid, but that's very unusual for me. But I'm not, wouldn't expect people to give away their bidding strategies. All I'm trying to say is there's some bargains.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate that. Is there any other business or things we need to talk about before I turn the meeting over to John or Stormy Withers here, who's our program today? Hearing nothing, John, I appreciate you joining us from Connecticut. I appreciate even more the fact that you've joined our club. And I believe you're going to talk to us about your collecting and collecting interests. Is that correct, John? Or,
Yes, and I have to thank Rick and yourself and everybody there for inviting me to say a few words. I really appreciate this kindness. Well, I think I've been a member for several years of your group, and it was either Scott or Lloyd DeVries who suggested I get in touch with you all. We came out to the East Coast in 1960 from Texas. I did a number of years in Grapevine and a number of years in Houston. And we have been stamp collectors. I'm a baby boomer and grew up with a family that was always stamp collectors. My father was in international construction and engineering, and he always would collect stamps from the various countries that he was doing business in. When we got to the East Coast, I was in high school and college and really kind of moved away from the stamp collecting, but we always kept the collections. And in 1970, we moved up to New York. And from there, I started adding to the collection. So my participation in the philatelic community has been somewhat eclectic. When we came to Connecticut in 1984, a relative of mine who is from right there in your backyard from Grapevine knew that I had been following stamps and recently covers, and told me about a series of postcards that her mother had left her. Her mother had just recently died. So she wanted to know if there was anything interesting about the cards, and took an envelope and sent a packet of the cards out to me. And I came to know a very imaginative Connecticut stamp and dealer and collector named Cliff Gilman here in Hamden. And to make a long story short, Cliff, in a couple of words, completely changed my interest in stamp and cover collecting. The cards turned out to be 3 years worth of RPO mail from my cousin's mother's boyfriend. She had moved from Alabama to Grapevine to pursue her career, and had left a boyfriend behind who had been a businessman on the East Coast. And that meant he was traveling regularly from Alabama up through the Carolinas and Virginia to New York. And if you can imagine, every day on RPO, he posted a card to the woman. And so from that start, and I don't know how to use Zoom as well as you fellows do, so I'll just have to hold these up. But this was the first venture into a diversified form of collecting. This cover or page, that's a sketch of my cousin's mother and a sample of the cards that he was posting from it. I don't know if y'all had much travel back and forth on rail, but the two major carriers in our area all the way through my college years were the Southern Railroad and what they call the Seaboard Airline Railroad. And his cards had all come from the Seaboard Airline Railroad. And as I told my cousin, it was really amazing because I had traveled that road back and forth to school. So to make a long story short, I expanded my love of stamps to include what Cliff Gilman always referred to as philatelic covers. They could be anything from a first day cover to various covers that my father and I would pick up as a result of business. I brought a couple of examples of how we would do those. This is a 50s envelope that came in from France. My father, because he was a licensed engineer, would have regular communications with all the various projects that he was involved with on the engineering side. And this one was from my days in Botswana. We were in Botswana for 3 years, and our youngest was actually born in Botswana. So Cliff started helping me organize my collection with the idea of keeping a chronicle of all of our experiences. And he pointed out to me, which I'm recently learning from you fellas in my involvement with the New Haven Philatelic Society, is when you get into your family correspondence, even though you're looking for postmarks and stamps and that sort of thing, it's amazing that they actually come through with the correspondence still in place. So I have family met letters and mail going back to 1842. And when you think about seeing how they post the letters in 1842 and then have the text and the stories that they were actually telling, most of those letters came from the family in South Carolina up to the family where they had come from in Virginia. So basically that is how I began the combination of my interest in stamps and first day and postal covers. From that, we went ahead and I know many of y'all have friends who are involved, we began designing our own philatelic items, first day covers and that sort of thing. And one of the first ones we did was my wife's uncle was in the last horse-mounted cavalry action by U.S. forces in World War II. And he had actually been captured in the famous Bataan Death March and had actually been killed on a prisoner of war ship at the very end of the war. But what we did was they came out with the West Point Bicentennial. We came out of West Point. We got an illustrator here in Hamden named George Wildman, who had done all of the years of the Pie cartoons for the comic books. And George was just right up the street from us, and he did a commemorative cover of West Point and the Purple Heart, which came out a little bit later. And from that beginning, we began doing our own philatelic items for items that meant something to us as a family. And eventually I ended up back in your area again because it was either Scott or Lloyd DeVries about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, he made a very clever Texas illustrator named Bob Emmerich. And I have come to know Bob. He's done a lot of first day covers in our family and everything. He did exceptionally good work. And he has basically given me some ideas about doing different things philatelically on the cover side. And I don't know y'all did much more, but one last thing that came from our love of the philatelic world, which I mentioned to y'all because I know one of the things Scott and his team are pushing is bringing the youngsters back into the hobby and the enjoyment of all philatelic activity. One of the last things George Wildman did with his son before he passed on was to create an introductory children's hidden objects and coloring book. And we developed this here, or George and his son developed this here, but it's been in our community for a number of years. But in case any of your group hadn't seen how this works, George, from the covers that he did for me, came up with the idea of creating a series of hidden object and coloring sections dealing with the philatelic hobbies. And the book is now, because of the printing companies here, at least here on the East Coast, I don't know how it is in Texas now, but here on the East Coast, a lot of these smaller printing companies are organized through Amazon, so that at very low cost, you can get these printed items. And what we're doing, my wife and I are having a series of these books sent to our grandson's second grade class in Florida. You're only talking, I think, 14 or 15 students, to give them kind of like an introduction to the hobby of philatelic collecting. And what we've been thinking of is George and his son left several blank sections in the coloring and the hidden objects sections of the book. We're putting in plastic sleeves with interesting first day covers so that when the child gets the book, they'll get both the coloring book and some first day covers in the pockets. So we're anxious to see how that works as a new form of introducing at least elementary school children to the hobby of philatelic collecting. And that's basically what I've been doing for the last few years. And like I say, I appreciate Scott or Lloyd DeVries or whoever told me to join your guys. Yours is the longest foreign stamp club membership I've had, but I think it was Scott or Lloyd that suggested I'd had such success with you guys that I've now got the same membership with Richmond, Columbia, South Carolina, and basically the long-standing membership with the New Haven Philatelic Society. So thanks again for all you've done for me, and I appreciate Rick giving me the chance to speak to you.
Well, you're quite welcome. We're glad to have you, John. I mean, you're quite an addition to our group, and you're quite the cheerleader for philately as well. Really appreciate it, man.
Well, it's hard to imagine, for over 60 years, it's been real good to me, I'll tell you.
Okay, John, thank you very much. I appreciate it greatly. Let's give him an applause for his time and effort. There was a short period of it that you were breaking up, but I got the last part and you made me think. We have a beginner collecting group led by Skip Ely here, who's also going to have presence at the expo, our show. And I could see where your magazine that you showed us there would be very, very useful in the case of young people. Don't you think, Skip?
Yes.
Could have done this.
The suspense. What was he going to say?
Dave, you're
Well, I
muted.
tried to say yes, and then this thing popped up that said, you've been muted. Do you want to unmute? And since I get left and right mixed up and what have you, naturally I hit yes, and then I had to find the unmute. So anyway, yes, of course.
Yeah, I tried to mute everybody when the presentation
think-
was going on. And
I think that was an excellent idea, Rick, to do that while John was doing his presentation. Skip, I'd like to have John send you a copy of that, and you do an assessment of it and determine how many we might need, and the club ought to be able to afford to buy a few of those.
Yes, and John, you've got my address, don't you? It's in the handbook.
I tell you, that's one of the things I wanted to compliment you on. The way you've organized and structured your handbook with the address and contact information, and I'll do even better. I'm going to do a sample for you of book with a little pocket in it, the way I visualize sending it down to our grandson. And then I'll also make sure, because I'm buying 10 copies of the book right now, I'll make sure that the link through Amazon comes out with a satisfactory copy. This is exactly the way it was originally issued by George Wildman and his son. And this will be great fun, because it would be fun to see how y'all look at the way George and his son structured the book and everything. And it'll be a big treat to them to know that we're getting some dissemination for the effort, because George had never even thought about doing illustrations for philatelic activity until I came to him. And some of the stuff he did, and like I say, your Bob Emmerich is every bit as good. Some of the stuff they come up with is absolutely amazing.
Well, I'm just overjoyed at the sharing that I'm seeing going on at these Zoom meetings, and what we may not be able to get together, but we sure are passing things, ideas, and information along, and that's great. Now, I'm going to open it up to anyone. I do want to state that the next meeting of the Granbury group will be Tuesday, November 24th at 7 p.m. and it will be via Zoom or the virtual meeting. We are not going to meet in live. I know the Mid-Cities is meeting in live, and the meeting will be next Wednesday in Arlington, and that's great. And several of us older folks have declined to go to those live meetings, however, but I wish them the best of luck, and I wish you all the best with the expo. So let me open it up. Is there anybody willing to do any sharing like John did, or a program of some kind for our next meeting?
Don't everybody talk at once.
I think Judy just volunteered.
I had asked Skip if he might do something, and he had hedged on giving me a solid answer as of this time, but and I don't want to pin you down, Skip.
Well, I think what we could do, Dave, is Stan and I could do a briefing on the show.
Okay, yeah, I do think that would be an important part of it. I don't know if that would fill out the hour that I like to plan this for.
I'll stretch it.
You'll stretch it, huh?
I'll talk real.
Well, there'll be several of us that won't be there, so that may be necessary.
Okay.
Big.
Thank you very much, Judy and Stan. Appreciate it. So Skip, get you off the hook for next month.
Okay, well, all I would have done was sort of an extended show and tell, whatever I was working on at the time, maybe with a few examples, and I can still provide some of that with the meeting. But we typically, our ULIS meeting in November was a sort of an expo update, and it usually filled up the agenda pretty well. So I think that's a good idea.
Great, appreciate it. Well, Rick, you hosted this. Appreciate you doing that. Rick, anything more you can say? I'm going to offer everybody the opportunity to just stay on and visit. I have no more business. Is there any business or anything else that anyone else wishes to share?
Rick, if you'll send me the stuff for the Zoom meeting for the expo meeting, I'll distribute that as soon as possible.
Okay.
So that we can remind everyone about it.
Okay, Skip, I'll do that. I'll get it in the mail.
All right,
tonight.
thank you.
All right.
Well, I'm going to stop recording, I guess, and just let you guys have at it or have at each other, whichever you want.
Okay, well, I think we're gonna head out.
We're gonna